there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode number 74 of the DBR podcast. It's going to be kind of a depressing episode because I guess it was about a half hour ago the Duke-Carolina game ended. And as you know, unless you live under a rock, and I don't know why you'd be listening to the podcast if you didn't know that Duke lost to Carolina, which sucks, and we hate it, and we're in a lousy, foul mood. But I have to introduce my compadres anyway. In Washington, D.C., Donald Wine.
Hey.
That was perfect, Donald. Thank you very much. And out in Denver, Colorado, Sam Klein. Sam, where did you watch the game tonight?
I was at a friend's house who also went to Duke with me, and that friend had a couple other people over, most of them rooting for Duke. And then at halftime, apparently these two Carolina fans were invited over for some reason. So I had to watch the second half seated next to two Carolina fans. Yeah.
Wait, hold on. It's their fault. I'm blaming them. Whoever they are, it's their fault.
I came in fully prepared to blame these people and by extension myself for this loss. So to those, I don't believe anybody who was at the event listens to the podcast. So screw all of you. And in particular, the two UNC fans who showed up. And it was one of those situations, and you guys probably understand where I'm coming from, what I'm about to explain. I think probably most of the listeners do, because they are big enough Duke or college basketball fans that they are able to obsess like this, that when you watch a game with people who just don't seem to know as much about what's going on, like they don't necessarily know who any of the players are, they don't know sort of what, like I explained the 4-minute media timeout to people like during the second half, like while all the drama was unfolding.
I hate this. I hate people like that.
Okay, so
I know. I'm not gonna say that I hate people like this, because obviously, not everybody is like we are. I think we understand that we are in the 1% of insanity when it comes to Duke basketball and college basketball in general. So I understand that not everyone is like me. However, in fact, I was in a situation earlier today where I could have been. I was up in the, you guys know I live in Denver. I was up actually skiing in the mountains today, and could have stayed in the mountains to watch the game with some other people who were even less knowledgeable college basketball fans than the group I ended up being with. And I told them, I said, guys, it's nothing against you, but when I watch a game that is as emotional, say, as the Duke UNC game at the end of the season, I tend to be kind of annoying. So it'd really be best for both parties here if I just leave and go do my thing with my Duke friends. So I left them, came back to Denver.
I should revise.
I thought that I was in good hands, and it turns out that I wasn't.
I should revise and say I don't hate people like that. I completely understand it. I hate it when you have to watch a game where you are really emotionally invested.
Yeah.
With people like that, where I mean, you want to be focused. It sounds silly. I mean, our watching can affect the game, but
there are some games. There are some games where you want to. There's some games where you want to explain the game. You're like, you're playing Clemson. You're like, hey, I'll explain it under 4 media timeout. But when you're playing UNC, when you're in the NCAA tournament or the ACC tournament, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, like those are games where you want to be focused and locked in and focused on every nuance of the game. And you don't have time to just be explaining under 4 media timeouts to people.
Exactly. So that was the unfortunate situation that I found myself in tonight, particularly during the second half when Duke kind of faded down the stretch. And Jason, I don't know, do you want to, we haven't recorded since the FSU game in addition to the UNC game. How do you want to divide up the discussion here?
I mean, there's a piece of me that I want us to make sure we talk about the Florida State game. It was a very nice win for Duke against a really high quality opponent. I mean, Florida State's one of the best teams. You tell me Florida State's making the Final Four, I'm not going to go, you're crazy. Florida State's a really good team. But, I mean, how can we not spend all our time obsessing about the Carolina game? I think we're going to spend our time mostly obsessing about the Carolina game. So let's start with that game. And Donald, I'll let you go first. I mean, I could toss you a question to start you off. In fact, that's what I'll do. Has Joel Berry missed a shot yet? I think Joel Berry just hit another 3-pointer with a hand in his face.
Look, Joel Berry, he had a moment in the second half where I was like, yo, Joel Berry, the real Joel Berry, is showing up. Because in the first half, I don't know who that dude was. That dude hit 5 threes. He was 5 for 5. He had 19 points and was the sole reason that they were even in that ball game. And I don't understand how Joel Berry decided that he was going to show out on his against us, because he did it a little bit against us in Cameron. But in the second half, I think we were talking about this offline, and he had this moment in the second half of the game in Cameron where he showed his true colors. He had a couple of just terrible shots, and that was what led us to pull away down the stretch and kind of solidify our win. This time he didn't do that, and I don't know why he decided he was not going to be himself today. But it was surreal, the fact that he was getting good shots and making them. Because sometimes he gets a lot of good shots and sometimes he's streaky, but he gets some great shots and just doesn't hit them. Today he was hitting everything, and I mean, if you told me that he, like, if I gave him the ball like 75 feet away from the basket, he probably would have made that too. Like, I don't get how on he was, but it wasn't like that was kind of something that fed the rest of the team for them, and that is the part that is most perplexing, is that he was the catalyst, and he's usually not the catalyst of that team.
You know, the surprising thing to me about Joel Berry, by the way, this wasn't his career high. He scored 31 against Clemson earlier this year, but this was his second highest, and that game went to overtime, by the way. The interesting thing to me about Joel Berry was that he had this huge first half, and then he was sort of absent in the second half until the final 4 minutes, when he again, turned it on, and he had 3 straight, jumpers and layups in the final 4 minutes that stretched out the lead for Carolina, and really gave them the win. It was like he was unbelievable in the first half, and then did nothing for the first 17 minutes of the second half, 16 minutes of the second half, and then took over again. He had a great game, and it was just really, really frustrating to watch, because he was making shots with hands in his faces. Gah, I hate that. Although, to some extent, you could say, and Sam, I'll let you get in. I was going to say, to some extent, his greatness sort of, on the other hand, we had the guy Justin Jackson, the guy who's been Carolina's best player all year, have for him a really poor game. He had a little stretch of about 3 minutes where he took over and he gave Carolina the lead that Joel Berry then stretched out. But Justin Jackson had a terrible game, was taking really bad shots. So maybe between the two of them, they combined to have an average. I don't know. I don't even know. Sam, what you got?
Well, I wanted to go back to our original discussion about UNC. This would have been 4 weeks ago now or so, before the first game, when the 2 keys that we pointed out were Joel Berry being kind of the leader of this team, even though Justin Jackson, I think we can agree, for the rest of the season, has been the best player on UNC, that this team kind of goes through Joel Berry, and that the other big key for UNC is that they get offensive rebounds and get second chance points. And I think that neither of those things came to fruition in the first game, which was, to both of these teams' credit, both of these games that we played against them, the one in Cameron back in February and then tonight in Chapel Hill, were both outstanding basketball games. And there were, mistakes kind of on both ends of the ball, but for the most part, very high level of play. The game tonight went more according to the script that we had laid out a few weeks ago, because Joel Berry was the leader of the team, and UNC won on the back of his incredible shooting, but also, I think, and we can talk about this, on the back of the impressive offensive rebounding that they had, the number of second chance points they got, and especially the points they got in the paint. And that was where, in the first game, I think we thought if Duke was going to lose, it was going to be because they weren't going to be able to match up inside. That didn't really manifest in the first game, but in the second game, it certainly did. And we saw that UNC guys were able to drive to the hole with a little bit more free will than they were in the first game, and that their bigs were able to get second chance points either on putbacks or kicking the ball back out and restarting the offense. And I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I know that UNC was much more productive on second chance and in the paint tonight.
Yeah, they only got 12 offensive rebounds, but they did a lot with them. and they were really great in the paint. Isaiah Hicks was the man. Isaiah Hicks had 20 points combined.
And he didn't play in the first game against us.
Yeah, right. But I was going to say he had 20 points combined in his past 4 games, and he had 21 points today. He really, I mean, it was his senior day, you know, and he showed up in a very, very, very big way. Let's talk about the good things for Duke. Donald, give me something really good that you saw for Duke in this game. Other than the fact, by the way, one good thing for Duke is everyone considers North Carolina a lock to be a number 1 seed, and we played them really, really, really even. I mean, they stretched it out late, but this was a nip and tuck. These were 2 very evenly matched teams. How can Carolina be a 1 seed and people are probably going to say that Duke's a 4 seed? Makes no sense. We're on their floor and we're basically even with them.
Yeah, and I was looking at the spread, at least on ESPN. I know there's different spreads on what Vegas and some of the books do, but there was like at 7.5, which I thought was pretty high considering, and it ended up being a 7-point victory for UNC. So I guess it was right at the end of right at the tip of what they predicted. But I think
I will tell really quick. I will tell you the line that I got. You know, there's this ACC wagering contest that we're doing on the board, and the line that I got was 6.5. That's what most people got, and I thought 6.5 was a great line to get on Duke. And Carolina got this crazy backdoor cover. They hit 2 free throws, and then Duke throws the ball away. You know, we don't even get our meaningless layup. I almost had a backdoor cover. Instead, I had a backdoor miss.
Right.
Anyway,
and I think the one thing that we
kids don't gamble on sports.
Yeah.
Right.
Good advice. I'm
Don't
down like $3,000. I'm down like 3,000 in the contest. Don't gamble.
In fake money. This is fake money. We are not gambling.
Oh yes, very fake. Thank goodness.
Fake dollar bills, monopoly money. But I think the one thing that we did well is we never gave up. Like there was no quit in our team. I mean, even when we were down, when the lead kind of stretched or the deficit kind of stretched, we never got out of it. And I think that was what was good is, while we may have taken a couple bad shots, we may have had a couple bad possessions, it wasn't because we gave up and we just kind of threw the ball at the rim. We were going at them all the way to the final whistle. And I think that is what you want to see in a team in March. Whether we win or lose, you always want to see us do our best, and you want to see us fight all the way to the end. I don't know if we did our best tonight. And in fact, I'll venture to say we did not do our best tonight. But what we did do great is play all the way to the final whistle. And I think that is what you're going to need going into March, going into the ACC tournament. And I think that's what we did well tonight.
I think Sam, that all the non-freshmen had really outstanding stretches in this game. Grayson Allen made a couple of really big shots for us. Luke Kennard made some unbelievably acrobatic moves around the basket. There was a point in the first half where Jay Billis said, "Who's better in the mid-range in college basketball than Justin Jackson?" And then Luke Kennard proceeded to hit like a mid-range shot that was really challenging. And I thought, I don't know, Luke Kennard is pretty good. I mean, Justin Jackson has obviously been phenomenal this year for UNC, but Luke Kennard has been about toe-to-toe with him, and today was much better. And then Emil Jefferson in the paint made a lot of great moves. There were a couple plays where he got the ball with good position down low and was just one-on-one, and you thought, well, he's going to score. I mean, whoever's guarding him, be it Hicks or Meeks or whoever on UNC, was not going to be able to stop Jefferson. And then Matt Jones, made a couple of nice offensive moves. He was really aggressive on defense. I think I liked a lot of what I saw from the veterans tonight. I think the one glaring issue that I would point out from them was Grayson Allen missing those free throws down the stretch that were just probably the killer for this team and that really deflated them at the end. From the freshmen, I think, yeah.
Really quick on the free throws, because so I was, going back to our original conversation about watching the game with friends, I was watching with my two sons, but I was texting with some buddies of mine. The four of us all lived on the same hall together freshman year, and we've been, it's lifelong friend kind of thing. And we were texting with each other during this game, and one of them was complaining bitterly about Allen missing those free throws. And I said, I don't know, this is natural regression. Grayson Allen was 8 for 11 at the free throw line. That's not bad. That's, that's like 77%, 75%.
It felt so much worse with those three at the end.
Right. They were absolutely. But I mean, it's not like you look at it and go, Oh,
No.
Duke only hit 80% of their free throws in this game. We hit 80% of our free throws. Sure, I mean, absolutely, it was the wrong time to miss them, but it was natural regression to the mean. And it's not like he bricked them bad. I mean, they rattled around the rim, they rolled around the rim, and they fell off. I can't blame him for that. But continue with your point.
Well, I was going to finish my positive with a negative, which is that Harry Giles really didn't look at all like himself, at least what we think he should have looked like this year. And I think it's a real shame that going into the tournament, it feels like Duke pretty much just has a 6-man rotation, right? We have Jefferson in the front court, and then there are 5 perimeter players around him that are vying for minutes, where it's Tatum, Tatum, Jones, Allen, Kennard, and Jackson. And that's pretty much all we can expect at this point from this team. And in years past, we've talked a lot about Duke's rotation and how Coach K likes to thin things out. I don't think that this year this is the rotation that he expected to be going into postseason play with, but that's where we're at. And Giles doesn't seem like he's contributing much, and I don't think anybody else played tonight. So
Bolden played 1 minute at the end of the first half.
Sure.
Very
okay.
end of the first half. Let me say this about Giles really quickly. I had written a little note to myself from early in the game that Harry Giles, there was a play where he walked, but he hit a 17-footer with a hand in his face, and he showed really nice touch on his shot. Now he walked, so it didn't count. But I was like, oh man, maybe we're starting to see a little more confidence, a little more flow from him. And then he had, it happened some in the first half, but he had that stretch in the second half. Oh my God, he got lost on defense on 3 consecutive possessions. He committed fouls on each one of those possessions. Actually, he got lost on defense, I think, on like 4 or 5 possessions because he committed 3 fouls, but he also gave up some easy shots to the Carolina big men. I think a team like UNC that gets the ball inside really well and that passes so well on the interior was a terrible matchup for Harry Giles. I'm still hopeful for him. I really am, because he shows you these flashes, that 17-foot jumper that he took with confidence, and his ability to jump out of the gym. He shows you those flashes, and I wish it would get there. It's almost there. One other thing I wanted to mention about Carolina, and I don't know, I think you guys, if you want to wrap it up, and then we'll move on. And I do want to talk about Florida State a little bit, but to me, the most important thing to come out of this game was I have firmly decided now that Emil Jefferson is back. I think we are now looking at the same Emil Jefferson we had at the beginning of this year, that we had at the beginning of last year, before he got hurt last year, before he got hurt this year. It doesn't, guys, tell me if you think I'm wrong. It feels to me like this is the same Emil Jefferson, who has phenomenal moves in the posts. Really, he's elevating better for his rebounds. This is not the guy he was a few weeks ago. And that's a huge, huge bonus for Duke. He was playing against some of the best big men in the country today, and at times he made them look foolish. And this is a big deal.
I think that he is back on offense completely. I think that on defense, there's still a step missing, and we really could use it if he was fully capable of defending the post and staying with guys after switches. And I think that a couple times tonight there were UNC players that burned Emil Jefferson because he wasn't fully prepared on the switches. And I wish we had seen more of that from him. But on the offensive end, absolutely, he rebounds really well on offense, and when he gets the ball. Like I said earlier, it seems like if he's one-on-one and he's got even modest position in the post, he's going to score. And it seems like as much as the UNC players try to lock it down, he can make one more, up and under move and scores easily.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
By the way, as much as I feel great about Emil Jefferson being back, Grayson Allen, I'm going to give you guys some numbers. And these numbers are terrifying. First of all, Grayson Allen was 2 for 4 in this game from the field. Now, he took some free throws. I mean, he was getting to the line, which is good. But he went 2 for 4 in this game. One game after, he went 1 for 3. The previous game before that, he didn't play because he was hurt. Previous game before that, he was 2 for 11 against Syracuse. Against Wake, he was 3 for 8. Against Virginia, he was 2 for 10. Against Clemson, he was 2 for 10. This is a guy who hasn't hit more than 3 field goals like this month practically. The last time Grayson Allen played,
his attempts were 3-pointers. Every time he drove into the lane is when he got fouled and went to the line.
Yeah, which is good, but he does not have anywhere close to the quickness or the explosion that he had earlier in his career. It is so clear he is still hurt, that he is still injured. The last good game he had was against UNC, and since then he is really, really struggling. I wish we had more of a bench because, God, I wish he hadn't played the past 4 games. I think it was after the Wake game that we started talking about the notion of whether or not he should sit. And we've lost 3 out of 4. I think, they've been close games. They've been good games. I don't feel down on the team. I feel very, very up on the team right now. I think we're in a good place, but I'd feel a lot better if Grayson Allen hadn't played the past 4 games because he's got to get healthy. If he gets healthy, we're winning it all. I'll say it right now. We're winning it all if he gets healthy.
When we talked about this 2 weeks ago about what should Duke do down the stretch about Allen and Jefferson, we thought, well, maybe if they don't play a couple games, Duke's in danger of losing some. Duke ended up going 3 for 4 down the stretch at the end of the season with Allen playing, or missing 1 game. And then against Florida State, he only played 16 minutes. So, Jason, I'm inclined to agree with you that we haven't seen his best. I mean, he did drive with authority tonight, and I think that he got to the line a lot and for the most part, as you said, was able to convert the free throws. But yeah, he hasn't really been the same player the last few weeks, and it's a challenge for Coach K going into the postseason, because how many guys on this team can he really trust to score? I mean, is it just Jefferson and Kennard at this point?
And Tatum.
And we're certainly in Tatum. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be even remotely sad if Grayson Allen sat out the ACC tournament. I'd be thrilled if he sat out the ACC tournament. I mean, how crazy is that? Unless he feels really healthy, unless we're going to see the healthy Grayson Allen who can take the ball to the hole and explode. Because if we don't see that, I think it's going to be very, very tough for this team to make the Final Four and win it all, which they have the potential to do. All right, Donald, you got anything else, or should we move on to Florida State?
No, let's move on to Florida State.
So, time for the Florida State Seminoles. Duke won that game 75-70. That final score, I think, is a little deceptive. That's kind of the closest Florida State got in that second half was at the very, very end there. Duke had a fairly comfortable lead throughout the entire game. Sam, I'll start with you. What did Duke do in this game that maybe we hadn't done, in our road losses or the first time we played Florida State?
I think that the ball moved around a lot on offense, and that lots of different guys were able to score. Frank Jackson certainly, I think, had the most impressive night, but you saw Kennard making good shots. You saw Tatum making good shots. Grayson Allen, we already mentioned, didn't play as much, but for the 5 guys that were on the floor for most of the game, which is, the rotation that I said before minus Grayson Allen, all those guys were really able to score well. Maybe not Matt Jones, but you can't expect it from everybody. I think that the fact that Duke tied Florida State in rebounding was really nice, and that they kept them kind of at bay. There were no moments where you felt like Florida State was really going on a run. I think toward the end of the game, there was like, why is Duke letting up? Like, there's still 4 or 5 minutes left, and yeah, they have a 12, 13 point lead, but oh no, now it's a 7-point lead. Oh, now it's a 6-point lead. I think there was a little concern for me that Duke didn't run away from them, and that they let Florida State creep back up. But for the most part, it was a pretty dominating performance from the first half all the way into the second half. And I was really impressed with that. And honestly, if that's the kind of performance we're going to get, even with Allen struggling, the team that we saw in Cameron on Tuesday night, I think, is a team that can beat anybody.
Donald? Maybe Donald doesn't want to say anything about Florida State. I think Donald,
perhaps not.
I'm muted. Sorry,
Donald's too busy. Donald's too busy responding to my Snapchats.
I was muted. Hang on.
I'm not editing this. This is going in, baby.
That's
Good.
fine. That's fine.
I passed you the ball. Wait. I passed you the ball, and you did nothing with it.
No,
Everybody, this is a great time to tell everybody.
It was just muted.
Donald and I can get real feisty on Snapchat, so follow us. We're great. There you go. That's it.
So what I was saying while muted was that one thing that I saw with Florida State is that they threw a lot of bodies at us. They played 12 guys, a significant minute, or at least significant minutes. And by significant, I mean not like 0+ or 1 minute. They played. I think the one person who played the least was Kumaji, who played 6 minutes. And one thing that they did was I wanted to say that they threw a lot of bodies at us to kind of tire us out because they knew we were going to play 7 or 8, even though it was senior night. And we took that punch and withstood it. And I think that was, early in the week, that was something that I was like, oh, that's a really good thing that we're walking into halftime. And my buddy who went to Florida State texts me and goes, well, this is over. We're not playing well, and you guys somehow took our best punch, and you're still up like 12. So I think that is what was awesome at the beginning of the week, is that we were able to come together and kind of take that punch, especially after the week that we had the week before where we lost both games on the road, to come back to Cameron and to say, this is our house, this is our night. I said last week that I thought Emil Jefferson was going to have a great game, and he did. 11 rebounds, 14 points, 6 for 6 shooting from the field. That's what you want to see from a guy who, a week ago we were talking about maybe he should sit out a couple games because he was hurt.
By the way, props. You totally called that. Major props to you, sir.
It's not even. It's one of those things where when it's your last game in a place that you've called home for 5 years, you're gonna want to go out a winner. You're gonna want to go out on top. You're gonna want to have a really good game. And I thought Emil Jefferson was prototypical. Like this is the reason he came back to Duke, was to have that senior night. And he didn't disappoint. He had a great night, and I thought that was what spurred the rest of the team, because he's the quarterback. He's the leader. He's the man. And I think that kind of performance is what kind of calmed everybody down. In the second half, even though it was, the score was 75-70, like you said, Jason, I didn't think it was that close at all. I thought it was a game that was pretty well in hand, and just kind of, even Justin Robinson and we got a lot of guys who don't play a lot of minutes. They got to get in and experience some of this game. So I think that is what you want to see, especially against a great team like Florida State.
By the way, you mentioned that Kumaji guy. At one point, he was standing next to Emil Jefferson. That dude is huge.
Oh, yeah.
He's 7'4". Jefferson looked like he was a child next to that guy. But luckily, he's totally uncoordinated, doesn't know how to play basketball, so he's 7'4", and it doesn't matter. I'll tell you, my big takeaway from that Florida State game was, and by the way, we also saw this at times against Carolina. Frank Jackson is, he has really long arms. He is amazing at finishing around the basket. Like, Frank Jackson had this great game, and yes, he hit some 3-pointers, but most of what Frank Jackson did in this game was taking the ball to the hoop, taking it in the lane, having guys bump into him and being able to finish. That was a coming out party for Frank Jackson, because Florida State, they're long, they're athletic, they have very good guards, and Frank Jackson was like, I don't care, I'm taking over. He was fabulous in this game. And if Grayson Allen's injuries have resulted in Frank Jackson really being able to shine the past couple games, and I'll give you a hint, you're going to hear his name from me a little later in the podcast when we do Player of the Week.
Oh, no way.
Yes way. Yes way. That is going to happen. Mark it down, baby.
You talking about Frank Jackson, or are you talking about another Frank Jackson?
I'm talking about Frank Jackson.
Oh, Frank Jackson. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know that guy.
Heard of him.
So I thought this Florida State game was encouraging. Like I said, to me, this week was encouraging. How do you guys feel? Let's do this before we get to the ACC tournament. Going into the ACC tournament, how do you all feel about the team? And we've lost 3 out of 4. I feel a heck of a lot better than I did a week ago. Sam?
I don't like that we've lost 3 of 4. I think we talked a couple weeks ago about how Duke kind of goes through this January swoon every year, and that's what I'm calling it now, is the January swoon. And that towards the end of the season, they might lose a game or two here and there, but for the most part, Duke usually rolls into March feeling pretty good about themselves. And obviously some years it works out better than others. This year, I don't know if that's the case. I think that these last 2 games have been good. Florida State game was really nice. Obviously, the UNC game was about as reasonably good as you're going to see Duke play against a team that is something like a 1, maybe a 2 seed. So I'm not down on the team after that, but I do wonder still at this point, 30 or whatever games in, what the identity of this team is. And there aren't many aspects of this team on offense or on defense that I think you can regularly count on game to game. Certainly there are games where Jason Tatum's able to score well. There are games where Matt Jones locks down on defense. There are games where Emil Jefferson can kind of do a little bit of everything. I don't think we see that every week, and that's what's concerning to me. I'm really scared about the ACC tournament, and certainly the worst thing that happens in the ACC tournament is that you lose your game and then you just wait around until the NCAA tournament comes around, which isn't the worst thing. But if Duke is trying to win banners this year, I don't know how they do it with a team that changes game to game, with a team that is so volatile and at this point doesn't have any kind of depth that is going to say, all right, 2 guys are off tonight, we can just sit them. Well, there aren't that many guys who have been able to step up and put in big minutes for this team. So I think I'm concerned. I hesitate to say this is the worst I've felt about this team this year, because I think in January there was a point where I felt pretty bad about it. But I don't remember in recent years feeling this unsure about a Duke team going into the postseason, even those years where Duke lost in the first round with those teams run by Jabari Parker or by Austin Rivers.
Donald, what about you?
So I think I fall in the middle. I think, Jason, you're really high in the team. Sam, you're concerned. And I think I'm in the middle. I agree with both of you. I think there's a lot to be, enthusiastic about. Like, I think we've played pretty well this week. I think, even despite the loss tonight, I thought we played a pretty decent game. We didn't stink the court up against, a team that people are saying deserves a 1 seed. I thought we showed that we deserve as much credit as UNC does. We played a really good game tonight. We just came up short. And I think against Florida State, I thought we played a really good game. I do agree with Sam in the fact that we've been inconsistent, and it's hard to kind of gauge this team as we enter the postseason, because we, from week to week, as Sam said, from week to week, you don't know which team is going to show up, and it seems like it's a tale of weeks. We had that one stretch between the end of January and the middle of February where we went on a run, and even with those games, we didn't fully click. We didn't fully put it all together. And that's what we're looking for at this point in the season. Can we have a few games where we string together, where we put it all together, and we are clicking on all cylinders, and all the other cliches that you want to throw out about a team that is on point? I don't know if we're there yet. So I fall myself in the middle, because I think I'm still enthusiastic about this team, but I want the team that we, that played in, basically the beginning of February and early this week. I don't want the team that played last week. I don't want the team that played most of January. But will we see that team? I think that's the question now, is what team are we going to see next week and the week after that and the week after that?
So the comment I would make is I think that the ACC tournament will be very telling, because this conference has been so tough on the road. It is so hard to win away from home, especially when you're playing, a team that's in the top half of the standings. And I think that may be coloring the view of this Duke team. We had a tough closing stretch. We played a Miami team that was on the bubble and got off the bubble by beating us. We played a Syracuse team that was on the bubble and got off the bubble by beating us both those games on the road. We played North Carolina on the road. You're right. Carolina Everyone seems to think at worst they're like the number 2, number 3 team in the country. There's some people who say they're the best team in the country. We played them in their place on senior night, and we were with them every single step of the way. So I want to ask you guys a question. Do you know? So we know Duke's best road wins this year. Duke beat Notre Dame and Virginia on the road. That's impressive. That is really impressive.
And Notre Dame being a team that we have never beat on the road before until this year.
Yep. Those are 2 ranked teams, and you tell me that either one are making the Sweet 16 or the Final 8, I'm not even mildly surprised. There'll be plenty of people that will pick both those teams to make the Final 4, especially Notre Dame. Duke beat both of them on the road. Do you know North Carolina's best road win? Wake Forest. Wake Forest. They beat Wake. North Carolina, Wake has come on strong down the stretch here, and we'll talk about the ACC getting NCAA bids in a moment. I think Wake probably played their way into the tournament this past week. But had Wake not made the tournament, and I guess they still might not, North Carolina would have exactly 0 wins on the road or neutral against NCAA tournament teams. 0. They happen to have gotten – Carolina is in this exalted position where they're going to get a number 1 seed, and everyone's talking about them, and all the everyone's going to be betting on them in the March Madness pools because they got a favorable home road schedule. We've talked about it before. I'm not going to get into all the numbers behind it. It's absurd. It was absurdly favorable. They didn't play Florida State on the road. They didn't play Louisville on the road. They didn't play Notre Dame on the road. They didn't play Virginia Tech on the road. They didn't play Miami on the road. They didn't play Syracuse on the road.
I feel like Duke played all those games.
They did. That's is that unbelievable? The only road teams Carolina played who had a winning record in the ACC were Duke and Virginia, and you know what? They lost both those games.
Well, there aren't any games on the road in the postseason.
Exactly. And that's why I'm high on this Duke team. That's why I think I feel differently than you guys. I've been looking at these home road splits, and they are absurd. They're ridiculous. The fact that Duke went 11-7 against this schedule, against a schedule this difficult, with all the injuries Duke had to battle, is truly impressive. So
and
Carolina
we also have a really good non-conference schedule. I'm not non-conference, a really good neutral site record. We have always had that. I mean, if you think about it, there's a reason why we play in the Garden every year. We play in Barclays every year. It's because those are the tournament. I mean, like you said, in the ACC tournament, in the NCAA tournament, there are no true road games. They're all neutral site. And I think that is what we are best at. I think that's what Coach K is best at preparing his players to undergo, is those games that are neutral site in front of fans that are, it's not going to be, obviously every arena that we walk in is going to be, when we're playing is mostly going to be against us, but we have that mentality that we know how to walk into an NBA arena or another college arena and take on another team that does not have the sanctuary that is their home court behind them. And that's where we are at our best, I think.
All right, gentlemen, let's move on to the ACC tournament, which starts this week on Tuesday in New York City, in Brooklyn, which just seems crazy, but, what the heck. And the game that we'll be watching on Tuesday is Clemson against NC State, the 12-13 game, because the winner of that Clemson-NC State game will play Duke on Wednesday. We did not get the double bye. We only got a single bye. We will play on Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and should we win, and I really, really hope and expect we will play Louisville on Thursday, also at 2 o'clock, and it's pretty likely that after that we would face Carolina again in the semifinals. Gentlemen, I'm guessing you'll be able to pull up and look at the bracket. I feel like we got a tough break. If you ask me, all these teams that were bunched there, right underneath Carolina, Louisville, Florida State, Notre Dame, us, Virginia. Those are the teams that were bunched right in there. I think the one that to me is the toughest matchup is Louisville, and that's what we got. I am pleased that we avoided Wake Forest. I think of the lower tier teams that we would have to face in that second round game, the one that I really wanted to avoid was Wake Forest. So I guess that's a good thing. But this is a tough road, isn't it? I mean, Sam, do you think we can we do the beat Clemson, beat Louisville, beat North Carolina, and then probably beat I'm guessing Notre Dame, maybe Florida State.
Well, on our side of the bracket, so pre-championship game, Duke has lost to everyone on their side of the bracket other than Clemson this year. So it's a tough ask because
wow,
there's
I hadn't realized that. You're right. That's awesome.
NC State. So the 12-13 game is NC State versus Clemson. Duke, obviously, everyone remembers, lost to NC State. If Duke wins that game, they get to play Louisville, and then if they win that game, they get to play one of North Carolina, Syracuse, or Miami. Now, to be fair, of all those losses, only one of them happened at home in Cameron, which was against NC State. The rest of those, all the good teams in that bracket, all the teams that are actually vying for NCAA tournament position, are all teams that Duke lost to on the road. But I think you're right that Duke got a pretty tough draw here. I think that Duke matches up really poorly with Louisville. The rest of those teams, though, I would say Duke is probably able to beat, even though they didn't demonstrate it all the time. I think Louisville's the really tough one. I think that if you're asking me to tell you where Duke is going to end up in this tournament, I think that Duke handles whichever team comes out of the Clemson-NC State game and then promptly loses to Louisville. Not to say that Duke can't beat Louisville, but they've been an especially strong team this season. They've gone up really well against pretty much everyone they've played, and I'm not going to be surprised. And honestly, I won't be disappointed if Duke loses to Louisville. I think that Duke is probably hovering for the ACC or for the NCAA tournament somewhere in the 4-5 range, and that losing to Louisville is not going to change the way the committee looks at Duke. I think that most college basketball fans would look around the country this year and say that Louisville's been a strong team, and that if Duke loses to them, it's not a huge deal. Now, that being said, I think that Duke is certainly capable of beating them, and I think that Duke is capable of beating anybody in the ACC because they've proven it this year. They beat the ACC champs, the regular season champs, as much as we can call them that, as Jason pointed out. Beat them once on the home floor. As we mentioned, impressive road wins against other top teams in the conference. So, I'm curious to see what happens here. I'm not going to hold my breath that Duke is going to make it all the way to the weekend. But the ACC tournament is always a good time. And, every year it seems like there might be a team or two that advances to the semis or to the championship that didn't necessarily belong there. And, for all the hoopla that Duke got early in the season, I don't think you guys would disagree. Duke doesn't seem like they deserve to be ACC champions at this point, but you never know when, like I said, the team is volatile, and you'll never know when all the guys are going to be clicking for a game or two or three at a time, and they could wind up, playing on Saturday night in Brooklyn for an ACC championship for a banner.
Hey, Donald, let me put it to you.
Yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, Donald, let me put this question to you. Okay, take Duke out of the equation. Take North Carolina out of the equation. Give me a team that you think, because Sam's right. There's always a surprise. Give me your surprise team. Give me your team that you're like, wow, I didn't expect that team to be in the semifinals or that team to make the championship.
So I think the team that could surprise people is going to be Syracuse, and only because, and you're thinking Syracuse, that's a easy pick. But Syracuse, if you recall, we talked about this at the beginning of the season. Syracuse started out awful. And for them to rebound from what was an awful start to the season to get to, if they beat, that would mean they beat Miami, they beat North Carolina, and probably either us or Louisville. That's a huge, huge run for them to get to the final of the ACC tournament. And I think that it would be a surprise for me. Now, I want to go back to looking at, we're talking about seeding for the NCAA tournament. I mean, the way that this is set up, this is a tough draw for us. But if we were able to win this thing, and I don't like thinking about losing in the semis or the quarterfinals because that's just not my style. But if we can win this thing, what would that say about our seeding in the NCAA tournament? There's talk about we would be at about a 4 or 5 right now. And we're kind of staying there. But if we beat, we beat Clemson, we beat Louisville, we beat North Carolina, and then we beat one of Florida State, Notre Dame, or Virginia, 3 teams that either have been really good all season, or teams that have been revered all season. In the case of Virginia, that has kind of fallen off recently. Those are that when you add that to the resume that we already have, it's hard for the NCAA tournament committee to say this team can only be a 4 or a 5. So
no. I think if so, North Carolina is probably going to get a 1 seed. If they make the championship of the ACC, I think they'll get a 1 seed.
Correct.
They maybe fall to a 2 if they lose to Syracuse or Miami. If they lose to the Duke Louisville winner, then they maybe fall to a 2. But I think if Duke, Louisville, Florida State, or maybe even Notre Dame or Virginia wins the ACC tournament, certainly Duke, Louisville, or Florida State, if any of those teams win the ACC tournament, they're getting a 2. They're
I believe that
getting
too.
a 2. And in fact, it's Louisville, I think, is the team that has the best chance to get a 1. I think it's if Louisville beats North Carolina in the semifinals and then wins the ACC, Louisville still has an outside shot at getting a 1 seed.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I mean, just last week before some of these dominoes fell, they were saying that even with, the win-loss record of a lot of these teams, that whoever won the ACC was going to get a 1 seed. And I think in the case of North Carolina and Louisville and maybe even Florida State, that hasn't changed. But I think for the rest of the teams, yeah, I think a 2 is the ceiling here. And I think that's something that is a nice strive for. But it's going to, I mean, obviously it all depends on where they place us, right? It could be a 2 in the West, but it's still a 2 seed. But I think that is what, that is the ceiling here. And I think that's something that's very attainable because the ACC, for all its strengths, has been erratic in the fact that anybody can beat anybody. And that is what this Duke team needs to take into that tournament, is that, hey, we're just as good as anybody else. We've proven that by beating North Carolina. We've proven that by beating Florida State, Notre Dame, Virginia, all on the road. Like, I mean, those teams, we didn't beat Florida State in a row, but we beat Florida State. I think taking that mentality into the tournament is what this team needs to get to the final. Because if you can walk into a game knowing that this team can be beat on any given night, then that finality is what is going to drive this team. And I think that is what this tournament is going to be about. It's going to be in Brooklyn. It's a new site. So, there's no real home court advantage. I mean, Syracuse is the closest team, but there's no real home court advantage in Brooklyn. We are going to have a lot of fans there. North Carolina is going to have a lot of fans there. Syracuse is going to have a lot of fans there. And I think that kind of, neutral site, a real neutral site for the ACC tournament for once, is going to be the key for Duke to shine, because I think that is where we perform best, is when the lights aren't really focused on us. And it's just a neutral site where everybody has the same odds. Duke is going to be just as, has great a chance as anybody else to get to the final of this tournament.
Hey, Sam, really quick. So who would be your pick? Who do you think could surprise us?
I like Virginia. I think that the advanced metrics really like Virginia, and that they had some tough losses down the stretch, but I could easily envision them pulling together on offense and beating every team, 54-49 going into the ACC championship and winning it. So quickly, I believe in Virginia.
Following up on that, do you think that's a surprise though? Because I was thinking about Virginia, like they are a strong team at a 6. They're probably one of the strongest 6s.
Yeah, right.
Ever.
I think
is that a real surprise?
I think the fact that they're the 6th seed makes them, it depends on how we're defining it. Certainly, I think that another team that's been intriguing to me this year. They haven't played well recently, but they've shown that they're able to beat good teams without necessarily having the talent, is Georgia Tech. And I think that Josh Pastner did a really great job with them this year. They're going to improve. And if that light came on for them in the ACC tournament, I wouldn't be surprised. Now they would have to do it out of having to play on Tuesday. But if you want me to pick a weird one, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest also is interesting to me. I don't see any of the other Tuesday teams being impact on the tournament.
Yeah, I can see Wake Forest making it to Thursday against Florida State.
Wake Forest is playing on Tuesday with arguably the best player in the ACC in John Collins. And like I said, arguably, I think that you can make an argument for Bonzi Colson or Luke Kennard or Justin Jackson. But if you told me that you think that John Collins is the best player in the ACC this year, I'd be like, fine. That's an appropriate opinion to have, even if I don't necessarily share it. That guy can win a game for you, and he might win 2 or 3 games for you. And they have to play Boston College in the first game, who's not very good at all. In the second game, they have to play Virginia Tech, who's really up and down. And in the third game, they would play Florida State. So you could see Wake Forest having an easy time getting to that Florida State game, and then who knows what would happen.
Yeah, guys,
so
I'm amazed that neither of you went with. If you ask me, who's the surprise team that's going to make a run? It's Florida State all the way. There may not be anyone.
The 2 seed.
The 10 seed, you mean? I'm sorry, I said Florida State. I meant Wake Forest.
Yeah.
I apologize. You were talking about Florida State. I was thinking about Wake but it's Wake. To me, it's Wake. Wake has won 3 in a row. They just won at Virginia Tech. That's not easy to do. They beat Louisville. And let's not forget, it was just a week and a half or so ago that they played Duke dead even pretty much in Cameron. I mean, this Wake Forest team is really good. I agree that getting Boston College is like getting a bye. I think Wake is playing their best ball of the season, and this sort of leads me to the next topic really quick. So do we feel like the ACC has secured 10 bids at this point? I mean, obviously.
So I'm looking at the ACC bracket, right? So just looking down the bracket, the top 4 guys are all in: North Carolina, Louisville, Florida State, Notre Dame. Then we look at the next line: Virginia, yes; Virginia Tech, yes; Duke, yes; Miami, sure.
Yes. They're 10-8. They're 20-10 overall. Yes, not even a question.
Syracuse has kind of a weird record. I don't know how I feel about them, although I think they probably get in. I feel better about Wake Forest than I do about Syracuse.
I think, first of all, 10-8 in the ACC. Everyone has talked about this conference is murderer's row. It is so tough. Sure, it is such a good conference. But they went 10-8.
The committee doesn't look at your conference record, right? And they might, outside of the fact that they officially don't. But Syracuse has some bad losses, right? They lost to St. John's by like 1 million earlier this season.
Syracuse has bad losses in 2016.
But those count just as much as the ones that happened this year. In the same season, certainly.
Well, no. I mean, the committee looks at what you do your last 10. They look at how are you playing. The committee's job is to find the best teams right now, the 64 best teams right now. It's not to find the 64 best teams in December or early January.
And I think
Syracuse is in.
The thing that certainly helps Syracuse is that there are a lot of teams with bad losses. Syracuse has, within that group, the group that's probably in the like 10 to 13 seed range, Syracuse may have some of the very best a couple of the very best wins in that group. So that certainly helps them. So yeah, maybe they're getting in, and then Wake Forest, and like we said, Wake Forest could absolutely go on a run in the ACC tournament, and you wouldn't be surprised to see them there in the championship game. It'd be a pretty incredible run for them, but you could see it. So it's hard to say that any conference is ever going to get 10 teams into the tournament, even a conference as big and as talented as the ACC. The conference tournament is set up that some of these borderline teams have to play each other and maybe knocking each other out as the tournament is going along. But so I'm going to hedge a little bit. I'm going to say that the ACC gets 9. I don't know which of Wake and Syracuse is not getting in, but it's one of those two.
I think you're wrong. They're both going to make it. Syracuse has wins over Florida State, Virginia, and Duke. There is no team on the bubble who has wins that are even close to comparable to those 3 wins.
So many inexplainable losses, unexplainable losses.
But not since early January. Their past 20 games, not quite 20, their past 15 games, they have been absolutely, unquestionably a tournament team. No, there's absolutely no question about it.
What do you think?
Now, by 10 teams, are you talking about fully in, or are you counting the first 4?
First four is part of the tournament.
Counts. It counts.
Okay.
It's part of the tournament.
So 10 out of so basically because I think that
10 out of 68.
Yeah, I think Wake makes the first four. I'm not sure if Syracuse does. And it's not because I feel like in the end it's not even going to be about whose resume. It's going to be about the fact that the committee doesn't want to take 10 teams. There's going to be some other team, and there's a lot of conference tournaments left to play, right? There's going to be a surprise. There's going to be someone who makes it to a final or outright wins their tournament in one of these smaller conferences, replacing a team that may or may not would have been solidly in if they had won. So I think in the end we get 9 teams in, and I think one of those teams is going to be either Wake or Syracuse, probably Wake in the first four. So that's my prediction.
All right, we'll see. We'll see. You got the ACC tournament to help bolster these teams' resumes.
Hey, if you're in New York this week, go to some ACC tournament games, huh?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah. I think if Syracuse wins one game, and if Wake wins 2, if Wake wins 1, they're probably still in, but they may be on the bubble. If they win 2, they're in. If Syracuse beats Miami, if Syracuse wins 1 game, they're all in, and that would give the ACC 10. And that's what I really want to see us get 10. I think the conference has been so strong. We deserve 10 teams. All right, guys. So it's time for parting shots. Unless there's something else that we need to be doing.
Player of the week. We're doing player of the week first or parting shots?
Oh, let's do player of the week first. All right. So I already gave mine away. So I already said I'm taking Frank Jackson. I thought he was absolutely incredible against Florida State. In a game where I feel like we needed a lift. I mean, Grayson was clearly hobbled, was coming off a game where he hadn't played, and Duke was reeling a little bit. And for a freshman to lift us on his shoulders the way he did, and Frank was the reason that we got out to a nice lead that we were then able to hold on to in the second half. And then I thought he played pretty nicely against Carolina. Not great, but not bad. He had 6 rebounds, which tied for the team lead. He had 2 assists, which tied for the team lead. By the way, I'm kind of bothered that 2 assists ties for the team lead. And he had 15 points, which is second highest on the team. I thought some of his some really athletic forays to the basket around a very, very good Carolina team that doesn't usually give up lots of shots in the paint. And Frank's use of the glass was really impressive against Carolina. So my player of the week, I think the first time all year I've picked him, Frank Jackson. Donald?
Frank Jackson's my player of the week for everything you just said, and the fact that I thought he was just outstanding all week, and he's been coming along pretty well the last few games. We're going to need that in the tournament. Frank Jackson's my player of the week.
And he moves into a starting role for him, and he thrived in it.
Yeah,
Sam,
absolutely.
you going to make it unanimous?
No, I liked Frank Jackson this week. I also liked Luke Kennard this week, and I liked Emil Jefferson this week. But I'm going to take Emil Jefferson. I think that he contributed at both ends of the court really well, and especially against Carolina was, as we said, nearly unstoppable when he had the ball one-on-one. Looked as good as any post player we've seen this season. So I'm going to give it to Emil Jefferson this week, and let's hope that we have more contentious player of the week discussions in the hopefully many weeks to come.
I can live with that. I like it. All right, gentlemen, it is time for our parting shots. Donald, I will start with you, sir. What do you got for me?
I don't really have a parting shot other than to say this. This is the most wonderful time of the year. It's March. It's March Madness. The ACC Tournament is upon us, and then after that, NCAA Tournament. If for some reason you have been living under the rock or you have not watched a lot of college basketball, this is the time where you tell your spouse, your significant other, your kids, your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers, stay the hell out of my way. I'm watching basketball for the rest of the month because this is the best time of the year to do it. I think this is my favorite time of the year. I know for you guys, it's probably your favorite time of the year. And I'm looking forward to seeing what this team is going to do. And I'm also looking forward to seeing what the rest of college basketball is going to do. This is one of those things where you walk into the tournament and you don't really know for the first time in a few years, you don't really know who's going to win. You don't really know who has the edge. And so it's going to be cool to see what players step up, what teams step up when the lights shine the brightest. So happy March, and let's get hunting.
Sam, your turn. What's your parting shot?
Do you, Jason? I don't. This might be yours, but I think the biggest news in college basketball this week, and news that is certainly relevant to the Duke program and the Duke family, was the enormous layup at the end of the game between Northwestern and Michigan on Tuesday or Wednesday night. Northwestern is now 21-9. They're 10-7 in their crappy conference, but they're ranked, I think, 35th in KenPom, something like that. 35th in KenPom. Northwestern's going to the NCAA tournament for the first time in their history. They've been a Power 5 school for the entire time that the NCAA tournament has been around. And our friend of the podcast, former podcast guest, Chris Collins, former Duke basketball player and Duke basketball coach and USA basketball assistant coach, is at the helm there. So our collective congratulations to him, prematurely perhaps, but that Northwestern is going to make it to the tournament. It doesn't matter, I think, what they do against Purdue tomorrow. It doesn't matter probably what they do in the Big Ten tournament. They're getting in, and that's an incredible accomplishment for Chris Collins and for their school and for their program. And I think that I speak at least for the two of you, and hopefully for many other Duke fans out there, that we're really happy for him.
Yes, that was not going to be my parting shot, but I'm so glad you brought it up. And folks, if you haven't seen it, there is a great Twitter video that the Northwestern Athletics tweeted out of Chris Collins walking from the bench, from the handshake line back to the locker room, and he's just, after that Michigan game, he's just elated. He's pumping his fists in the air, and you can tell that he also realizes what Sam just pointed out, what the entire college basketball world realizes, which is that Northwestern is going to the tournament, and he's so excited. It's a great video. And speaking of videos, this is not my parting shot, but I want to tell people, if you haven't seen the Hallelujah parody that a Duke fan posted on YouTube, it's called "Let's Go Duke, Yeah," as opposed to Hallelujah. It is a really clever video. It is just brilliant. And the other video that everyone needs to see, did you guys see the Brendan Bresser, Antonio Vrankovic hype video?
Yes.
No, not yet. I saw that it was up there, but I haven't watched it yet.
I saw it. It was pretty funny with the.
It's so great. The coordinated high fives. Oh, they're
the
different.
coordinated high fives. Yeah, that was
their
really
handshakes. Oh my God, it's great. It's great. But my parting shot, and we don't encourage gambling, ladies and gentlemen. There's no wagering going on the podcast, and we don't encourage you to wager. But if you happen to be someone who occasionally wagers on college athletics, I found a website, and I was able to look at how everyone in the ACC, and I'll post this in the thread that we put, for the podcast this week, so folks can see the fabulous research that I did that went into this. How every single team in the ACC has done against the spread. And you may say, Jason, why did you waste your time doing something as silly as that? Well, the answer is because I sort of feel like it's an interesting way to gauge how teams have done relative to expectations. It's not just your record. It's sort of, how did you perform in your games relative to how the gamblers thought you were going to perform. The team in the ACC that has the best record against the spread, I'll ask you guys, can you all guess, who do you think has the best record against the spread in the ACC this year?
Duke.
Florida State.
Okay, Donald, if you said Duke, you're
that was
wrong.
Silly.
Well, we'll get to how wrong you are in just a moment. The answer is Notre Dame. Notre Dame 14-8-3 against the spread. By the way, 3 pushes on Notre Dame. I'm amazed, but 14-8 is really impressive against the spread. Up next is Louisville. They went 17-11 against the spread. Then Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech were both 15-11 versus the spread. And Virginia was also 17-11 versus the spread. At the very bottom of the ACC, the team that was worst against the spread, the absolute worst, was Miami, 10-18. The next worst, your Duke Blue Devils, 11-19.
Duke's got to be bad against the spread every year, right? Because the expectations are always high and the team is popular. So Vegas will give them more points will take more points away from them because because fools will bet on them.
Well, but you would say the same thing about Carolina. I mean, certainly there are a ton of Carolina supporters out there. Certainly you would think that UNC would get points because people love to bet on them. Carolina went 16, 14, and 1 against the spread so far this year.
All right. Prove me wrong.
Yeah. So there you go. And I think one of the telling things to me about Duke's 11-19 record against the spread is if you think back to what we thought this team was going to be early in the year, we haven't blown that many teams out. You know, I mean, like Florida State that we beat by 5, we didn't cover. The line in that game was, I think, 8 points. We did not cover against Florida State. We actually, you know, we talked about we didn't cover today against UNC, but you know, even in the games that we've won, there've been a lot of closer games than I would have thought this season. And I can't decide whether that's something that concerns me or whether I feel like we're a team that is battle tested. We're a team that is, you know, really had some tough contests. Look, both games against Wake Forest were really close games. We played, you know, a really close game against Clemson. You know, teams that you wouldn't expect us to have had to battle as much as we did. And you know, it came down to final possession kind of games. And Duke's actually fared fairly well in those. I mean, yeah, we lost the Syracuse game, we lost the Miami game. They were both very, very, very close games. But, you know, I sort of like the way we've done in some of these really tight contests. And maybe, even though we haven't been as impressive as people thought we would be this year, maybe, you know, this is a team that is tested and knows how to play down the stretch and can pull off some wins. I don't know. I'm going to try and take this negative and turn it into a positive. Do you see how I did that, guys?
I appreciate that.
Cool? All right, well, that will do it for us this week on the DBR podcast. I hope you all enjoyed listening and you've enjoyed being with us for this season. We now embark upon the postseason. The ACC tournament begins on Tuesday. Duke begins play on Wednesday, and hopefully they'll be playing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all the way through to the end. That would be our goal. And we will be back with you. Guys, what do we think? We'll come back once we know the tournament pairings, right? We'll come back on Sunday?
Yeah, most likely.
Yep, that's the plan. You will see another podcast from us once we know where Duke is going to be playing in the NCAA tournament. Until then, go out there if you live in New York and support the Blue Devils. And we leave it now to the DBR's faithful Duke band as they take us home.